I'm just going to practice Smaug. Smaug.
Oh, you don't have to worry about that in this one. In the 70s one, you can just say smog.
Oh, great. Welcome to Your Inner Child's an Idiot. This is a podcast where we look back on things from childhood and see if they're any good. My name's DJ.
My name's Damon. I definitely knew we were recording and wasn't continuing to read the latest National Geographic.
The latest? Do they still make National Geographic?
What are you talking about?
Look at that.
Look at this, Mars. And here, subtitle, we can't get enough of the red planet.
Oh, I am living for it.
Yes, Mars, serve Hanny.
I gotta be honest. This makes me a little bit nervous because, look, we all know, like, I'm the superhero comic book nerd of our duo, but I also, like, barely remember most of it. It's like, I remember it like you remember your 7th grade English teacher. Like, I got the general gist, but if you were like,
Mrs. Rotolo?
Describe her face in detail, you'd probably be like...
She was an older woman, I think of an Italian descent. She had dark black hair, She wait, that's my 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Rotolo.
Isn't it?
Who was my 7th grade English teacher?
All that to say, I'm my area of quote unquote expertise is very foggy, but you are an actual fan of Tolkien and of this whole oeuvre that we're about to dive into. And I'm afraid for various reasons. One, that I'm not worried about making a fool of him. That's not true. I don't mind making a fool of myself.
You will
especially
ease into that like a warm bath.
But what I am worried about is that I'm not going to like it and our friendship will suffer.
There is a chance of that. But I've ended friendships for less.
I know that. And
also, I think we're overplaying how much of an expert I am, or how much like of a
you've read the books and you like the movies. Yeah.
Yes, I do. I'm going to save that story for the Fellowship of the Ring, but I mean, I feel like I sort of got cast as a Lord of the Rings fan, and I sort of became more knowledgeable, mostly because no one else knew what to buy me for Christmas. So when the Lord of the Rings movies came out, they just bought me Lord of the Rings stuff, and I was like, guys, this is too much. Too much Lord of the Rings stuff.
It's weird because like I'm actually a pretty bad fan of most things, despite obviously loving movies and having a podcast where I talk about movies and TV all the time. Like, I like comic books, but I'm not obsessed with anything. And
that's probably for the best, though, don't you think?
It's almost hard to be that way. You either have to hate it or be so obsessed with it. And sometimes it's okay to just like something.
Just be a casual fan.
A casual fan. Although I would argue that you're more than a casual fan because you've read the books multiple times, and you used to, at least when we were sharing a household together, watch the trilogy of Peter Jackson movies once a year.
Yeah.
And then how long has it been since you've seen this cartoon? We're watching the Rankin and Bass 1977.
I think it's 77.
The original
we probably could have looked that up. This is the Rankin Bass animated.
This is the memory
TV
portion,
special.
Damon. No looking up anything.
You're absolutely right. I can't. No knowledge can be bequested at this point. The Supreme Court ruled in 1992, oddly enough.
I can't define two guys talking about something they barely remember, but I know it when I hear it. That was a reference inside of a Lord of the Rings Hobbit podcast.
I love a Jesse Helms reference in a Lord of the Rings podcast reference.
Jesse Helms deep.
Well done. Thank you. So I've actually seen this movie fairly recently because I think it was one of our quarantine movies. But before that, it had been probably a good 5 or 10 years since I've seen the Rankin Bass movie. Mostly because it is a weird watch.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say.
Especially in this post-Lord of the Rings era where Lord of the Rings has sort of entered into the mainstream. People have an established idea of what the Lord of the Rings is, and it's mostly Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And now coming back to this version of The Hobbit, it's kind of like, what is this? And it's a very specific time in animation as well. Where, we were working out some of the kinks still in this 50-year-old medium.
They hadn't figured out animation in the 70s? Yeah. It's,
this drawing goes after the other drawing, but we're going to photograph it, but it'll go by so fast. Okay. So I just moved Gandalf's stick a little bit. Okay.
You're saying, I appreciate network notes. You're saying you want the mouth movement to match the words coming out of that character's mouth? No, I don't buy it.
And how is the drawing going to sound like John Huston? Wait, you've hired John Huston. Oh, he's already recorded his lines. And I should have been drawing the mouth to those lines. Okay. Now, I don't want you to get angry.
But I did not do that. So
we're going to either have to redo all these drawings, or we're going to have to bring John Huston back in.
Yeah, so I have seen this cartoon, but it's been since I was a child, like a true child, like whenever we probably watched it in class.
The one true child.
We probably watched it in class after we read this book, which is the only of the Middle Earth books that I've read was The Hobbit.
It's truly the type of movie that would be brought in on a giant TV wheeled on a cart.
Laser disc, perhaps.
Teacher looks a little hungover, maybe. I actually watched this. I caught this on remember when the Disney Channel was a premium cable channel?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Kids
premium
Incorporated.
channel. Kids Incorporated.
We're gonna have to watch that for this.
We caught it on a free weekend for the Disney Channel. My dad saw it on the TV Guide channel, which may not have even been branded yet as the TV Guide channel in that day and age. And he was like, I want you to watch this. I think you'll like it. And this was the first exposer I ever had to Middle Earth.
It didn't catch with me like it did with you.
It is a very, he had the book on hand, so I immediately wanted to read the book, which is a lot better than this movie. If memory serves, Your Honor.
I remember this being weird because Gollum is like a lizard in this.
He's very frog-like. And he's voiced by Brother Theodore, which, friend of the pod, from The Burbs.
Okay.
You are the one who lives next door. He was also a favorite of David Letterman, so that's how he got this sweet Gollum gig.
Wait, did David Letterman produce this?
No, but Brother Theodore was like kind of a thing in the late 70s, early 80s, because he would pop up on David Letterman a lot and yell at David Letterman, and David Letterman loved it to no end. This also, so it has John Huston, Angelica's dad is in this, playing Gandalf. You got Orson Bean, who you might remember from being John Malkovich, and Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. And there's a lot of other weird people at the nadir of their careers in 1977. Otto Preminger is in this as Thranduil, the Wood Elf King. A lot of other weirdos. I think the thing that sticks with me the most, though, is the animation is just fucking insane. It has really kind of morose backgrounds. Everything's in this watercolor style for the backgrounds, but they're also like washed out and kind of like gray in their look. So there's this weird, somber atmosphere to this, rollicking lark of a fantasy book intended for children. And then the animation is done in this style where every line is treated with the same weight. And some people might think of like the Tintin comics where they're just used simple lines. But imagine if Tintin, every wrinkle on his face was drawn in the same weight as his outline. That's the Hobbit.
Right.
Like every crease on everyone's face, every knuckle gets the same weight as every other line. So they're just these almost frog. Everyone looks like a fucking frog. It's hard to call out Gollum when Bilbo also kind of looks like a goddamn frog. Everything is, it's just a very specific art style, but also very good. Like there's part of me that's like, I don't like this, the way you've done this, but it's also really good animation for the most part.
Yeah. And this one it's split into 3 movies, as we know.
This movie is 12 hours long.
This 198-page book is split into 3
The last 5 pages are 3 hours just on their own.
Right, yeah.
All great choices made by wise people.
Okay, so we're going to watch The Rankin & Bass, The Hobbit from the 70s. Watch along with us. We'll be back after this. We need to do another ad for our own money-making
my God,
venture.
Of course, it never ends with these ads.
We're just
Am I getting a
cogs
free podcast?
in the system. We're in the cogs in the clock of capitalism.
Do I get a promo code for our podcast that maybe I can get it for a small discount?
Yeah, if you enter Patreon.com/Your Inner Child's an Idiot into your browser.
Oh.
That will bring you to a place where for just $1 up to as many infinity dollars as you want to give us, you can be a patron of the show.
Wow, that is a great deal.
What a deal. You can get your names written credits. You can get your name read by us at the $5 level. You can get a drawing by you. You can get a song by me. You can get... we'll come up with something else. We need to come up with something else. We need another level.
And all I need to do to take advantage of this deal is to type a uniform resource locator into my address bar on my preferred browser.
Once again, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure...
Ooh, very nice.
/ World Wide Web, period. Patreon.com/Your Inner Child is an Idiot. Oh, sorry. Patreon.commercial /
Yes, thank you.
Your Inner Child is an Idiot. Damon, would you please recap this movie, because I can't even begin to think how I would do that.
DJ, I could recap this movie in my sleep.
Can you do it in less than 30 seconds?
I thought you were going to ask me to go to sleep and do it.
Just lay down.
Prove yourself right, Damon. Bilbo Baggins, homebody. He's a hobbit. They are about 3'6", and they've got hairy feet. The wizard Gandalf comes with 13 dwarves, take him to the Lonely Mountain that was taken over 60 years ago by a dragon named Smaug. They go on an adventure. They encounter trolls that try to eat them, other items that try to eat them. They encounter Elrond the elf. They encounter goblins, eventually get to the Lonely Mountain, chase off Smaug, but triggers a political power void or vacuum, and get to the Battle of Five Armies. Anyway, they save the day. The dwarves take back their homeland, and Bilbo goes home with a magic ring, I should mention.
And I'm sure that won't come into play later.
Yeah, that's why I forgot it. It's such an inconsequential thing that isn't worthy of, 3 sequels.
Really well done.
Thank you. I've rehearsed for this my entire life.
It's almost like you're obsessed with this story in general.
Well, everything that happened in my life pre-2001 meant I had to recount the plot of The Hobbit to many people. Now, what is that again?
They do kind of recap this in the beginning of the Lord of the Rings trilogy movies, right? Like, they basically recap what happens in The Hobbit in the first, 10 minutes.
Yeah, they recap the juicy stuff. I mean, the ring-centric stuff where he finds the ring and you hear, Gollum wailing. And then, that's about it. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, that's for that story.
Anyway, this short guy found a ring in a mountain. Anyway, on with the show. Take it from there, Ian McKellen.
And you would have learned in this one that Gandalf is kind of a dick, which I learned.
Gandalf is kind of chaotic good, I would say. He just seems like menacing for no reason.
He's like Holly Golightly of a wizard. Like, he's just like, sometimes he's there, sometimes he's just like, whenever he feels like it, he shows back up.
He's like, now I work in an office, so he reminds me of the manager who's just always popping into meetings, but he won't stay for the whole thing, even though it's really necessary for him to be there. So he just wants to pop in, get 30 seconds worth of stuff, and then heads out, and then you realize you were supposed to get him to sign off on this other thing, and you're like, God damn it, I'm going to have to try and chase him down.
Now we have to have another meeting just for that.
It's almost like that's his scheme to make himself look more important, just constantly having meetings. I tried to encourage one of my work friends to watch this, and I told her that she should get stoned and watch it, which she did on Saturday night. She made a day of it. She made food. She had a friend over. They made it 5 minutes in before they were too freaked out to continue watching. So I imagine it was, that put him smack dab in the first verse of Glenn Yarborough's song, right?
Which one?
Well, they made it 5 minutes in, so the first one.
Okay. Yeah, just long enough to see Bilbo get browbeaten into this adventure. Leave him alone. I think we've talked on the podcast that I don't mind when there's sort of a plot hole just to get the plot moving. Right.
And that's
they do get right into it.
That's kind of The Hobbit in a nutshell. I've read the lore reasons of why Bilbo had to be part of this adventure, and I've never bought it. The idea is that Bilbo is a hobbit, and Smaug has never smelled a hobbit before. So it would be best to have him come along. But I mean, Gandalf does not know really Bilbo. I mean, supposedly they had encountered each other when Bilbo was a kid, but it's not like they're old friends and he's like, oh, you'd be perfect for this burglar thing because I see something in you that's perfect.
He's a connector.
No sense.
It's also not clear why Gandalf's involved by this movie, because we jump right into the adventure and then stall with songs. Like, because at first I'm like, oh, okay, we're not fucking around here. Because the Gandalf shows up immediately, and then the dwarves are right there, and then we're like into it, and then we have a lot of pausing after that.
By 7 minutes into this movie, we're about halfway through the second Peter Jackson movie.
Yes, pretty much.
The Gandalf. You mean why is Gandalf associating with these dwarves?
What's he doing?
I think that's part of the thing. The interesting thing about The Hobbit is that it is written for children. And you can tell when you read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings back to back, they are aimed completely at different audiences. And The Hobbit, you can tell, is kind of like a first pass at this kind of world where after you read Lord of the Rings and then go back to The Hobbit, you're kind of like, well, that doesn't, why is Gandalf doing this? I think the lore reasons is that Gandalf is aware that Smaug or Sauron has reemerged. And that is true in the appendices. When he says when they're at Mirkwood and he says, I have business to deal with down south, he is literally talking about he has to go drive Sauron out of the southern part of Mirkwood because he's causing problems. So his concern, though, is that if Smaug or Sauron, God damn it. Every villain in The Lord of the Rings has an S name, and it's Sauron, Saruman, Smaug.
This is annoying for you, so can't wait.
So welcome to hell, passive viewers. Well, he's concerned that if Sauron were to rise to power and were to ally himself with someone like Smaug, that we'd be fucked.
Right.
So that is why he is dealing in the concerns of a bunch of group, rando dwarves.
Was The Hobbit the book, did that come out first, or was it like a retroactive prequel?
No, it came out in the 30s, and the Lord of the Rings didn't come out until the 50s.
Okay, so it was it really was like a first pass, and so he built this whole lore. Okay, that makes sense.
And in fact, he went back, he did the George Lucas thing where in the second printing of The Hobbit, he went back and changed some things to make it fit better with the Lord of the Rings. Like there's a lot of changes to the Riddles story where Gollum just lets him go originally, but he thought that undercut the power of the ring. So he had Bilbo have to escape from Gollum, and then Gollum would want to chase him for the rest of his days. Oh. So that was something that got changed. And I think there were a few other things, but that's the big one.
We're immediately, though, like, we start to leave the Shire and we're immediately reminiscing in song.
Oh, yeah, we're already winsome about home.
Just left the Shire. It's like, yeah, I know. You might have known this, but I didn't realize there was so much music. There's so much music.
I remember that there were...
It's a musical.
What I think about this movie, I think of that Glenn Yarborough song, The Greatest Adventure. But there is a lot of songs in this. And what's weird...
The goblins can jam. We learned the goblins.
I was really into all the goblin songs.
The goblins kind of slap.
It's a bop. Am I using that term correctly?
I don't know. The goblins can fuck. Is that? Am I saying that?
Yeah, I believe so. I think this is all correct. It makes us seem young. What's weird about this is that the songs that actually are pertinent to the plot are they sort of I don't know. They're not very loud. I don't know the word. What you would say? They're scaled back so that they almost seem like background music, and then someone will refer to them, and I'm like, oh, is this? This isn't happening in my head. This is something that's actually in the environment. There's a moment
they're not like showing them like together. It's like you see the heroes and then you see the villains. And so I don't know if that's like an animation thing, but it was like, wait, is this happening concurrently?
Oh, I meant like even like in singing, like you don't see people singing.
Right.
Like the dwarves are singing at one point, and I thought it was just background music. And then Gandalf says something like, their song moves you, doesn't it? And I'm like, what? Oh, I didn't realize this was actually something that was currently, in the environment. But then Glenn Yarborough's like scream warbling all over the soundtrack at other times, which is
that's like actually Gandalf's voice, singing voice.
Yeah, but I like the Goblin songs. I didn't actually mind much of the actual songs that people sang in the movie. It was mostly just that Glenn Yarborough song, which was just like stuck out like a sore thumb. It was just like this very American folky song where everything else fit with the Middle-earth environment.
It was like your classic like sing-songy children's movie vibe, and that fit a lot more than like Cat Stevens vibe, like warbling about what the hell.
The greatest adventure has yet
over and over
what
again.
lies ahead. Yeah. I will say all the songs, except for Glenn Yarborough, are from the book because J.R.R. Tolkien will never pass up a chance to put a whole fucking like 6-verse song in the middle of a chapter. It's like his demo tape. It's like he's like sliding the demo tape across the table. I'm like, John Ronald Rule, get this the fuck out of here. And why am I just hanging out by your car and you're selling me CDs out of your trunk?
You got to check out my band.
I'll just talk about the casting. I liked John Huston, Angelica Houston Sr., as Gandalf. But Orson Bean, I think, he was a little too zen as Bilbo, and so he never really, his voice never expressed fear. His voice never seemed to express consternation or anything. It always seemed relayed at the same like level all the time. Even when he was being threatened with being eaten, he was like, "Oh my word!"
Yeah,
and I'm like, "He's gonna eat you."
It's like kind of charming, but it's also like it doesn't fit.
Yeah, the animation would show him being scared, but his voice never matched that. So I don't think I liked him very much in this.
Yeah, I buy that.
Like, there's when he's reading the contract and he's like, he's just going over the terms of his contract and he says, funeral expenses. And then he faints, but the highest his voice ever gets is funeral expenses.
Yeah.
Like you read it wrong.
You want to do that again? No, you don't. Okay.
No, I got it.
Guess we're good. I have to be honest, mostly what I have are questions. Okay. Because the story is like, it's other than the sort of lore part of it and like, why did that happen? Which is not really important, really. It is a pretty straightforward, it's for the lore that comes out of it. It's a pretty straightforward story of like, they go on this adventure to like get rid of the sort of epilogue of the War of the Five Armies is a little bit like, oh, okay, we're just gonna talk about, we're like doing this because you would think you vanquish the dragon, you move on. I do like it's interesting that Bilbo isn't the one, even though it's his like he figures out that Smaug is missing a scale and therefore has a weak point, but he isn't the one that brings him down. Yeah, it is interesting. It is like he is responsible for sending the thrush to tell the men in Lake Town that it was like, okay, this is a little unnecessarily complicated, but is, I don't know, an interesting choice.
The talking thrush, of course.
And then he gets to say, you speak the truth, old thrush. Which is probably something I'm going to try to work into daily.
Oh, yeah, in casual conversation. Yeah, I kind of like that. I think it would be weird if Bilbo was like chucked a spear into Smaug's chest.
He does a fair amount of swashbuckling in this story. Like he
holds his own against those rabbit spiders, those bunny spiders.
Which is why I think it's a little I think you make a really good point that he's a little undercut by the voice acting because he, while terrified and like not built for this, quote unquote, he's the bravest. He proves himself time and again to be the bravest of the bunch. And like when shit's going down, you can count on Bilbo. These dwarves.
You certainly can't fucking count on Thorin Oakenshield.
Yeah, what's he doing?
One of the things I like, and probably the thing that makes me
handsome in the movie, though.
Yeah. One of the things I like about The Hobbit, maybe even a little bit more than Lord of the Rings, is that it's probably closer to my politics than Lord of the Rings is. And most of that is because almost everyone in charge that they encounter in The Hobbit is a fucking moron.
Yeah.
Thorin Oakenshield is a coward. The Thranduil, the elfin king in Mirkwood, is an asshole. Yeah. Bard the Bowman is fine. But in the book, there's the Master of Lake Town, who's kind of like a low-level vengeful, greedy bastard. So there's always like this feeling like don't trust authority, like put your faith in people who have like proven their worth, which is kind of like the main thrust of like Bilbo Baggins is no one from Nowheresville, but this whole place would be screwed up if he hadn't like stepped up and stabbed a bunch of spiders and told a thrush to go tell Bard where to stab a dragon. So I love that. One of my complaints about the Peter Jackson movie is they sort of make Thorin into like an Aragorn type.
Right.
Which makes his turn into a greedy asshole at the end. Like they have to do a lot of work, which in Peter Jackson's version means a lot of slow motion panning of him looking at treasure to make him into an asshole. But he is consistently a failure in leadership throughout the book and this movie. And it's one of the things I love about it is that he's just this entitled prick who just keeps putting a person he has explicitly said he does not trust to do the job he's been hired to. The minute like push comes to shove, he's like, go burgle something, go talk to those 3 man-eating trolls and see if you can steal some of their meat for seemingly no reason.
Yeah. That was just kind of like fucking with them. I see some trolls. Let's fuck with them is basically what.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird.
I wanted to talk some more about, because you were talking about how there's a lot of singing and a lot of montages in this movie.
Yes.
And it seems like within like 5 seconds of leaving his house, where Bilbo is like moved by the song of the dwarves and like excited about adventure.
How could
like
you not
we cut to them like walking on a path and Bilbo's just complaining about having to go on this adventure. And I was like, wow, just so quickly, his like entire character turns into just complaining and wishing for his, seat by the fire. Well, I think this movie might have the opposite problem with Peter Jackson's movies in that it might be too short. It seems like it moves at like a... I'll just say, like, it feels like the characters are just like bopping along into whatever the story needs them to do. And if there was like at least a scene where something bad happened to Bilbo, instead of just like montages of them walking and him having the exact opposite character than the scene previous, I feel like there could have been a lot more like narrative work.
To your point, if they had cut the sort of interlude songs, it's a 45-minute movie. So
absolutely.
Yeah, you could have done a lot with that.
It also has like, there's a thing, I never got into anime as a kid, and it was partly because they had to sort of translate it over from Japanese into English. The lines always felt like they just kept like piling in lines into people's mouths to justify why their mouths kept moving.
Right.
And that feels... There's always like an awkwardness in Japanese anime that's been translated into English because they're either talking a lot or they're talking really quickly because the mouth doesn't move enough to get the English translation in there. And I got a lot of that in this. I don't think this is a Japanese animated movie, but it feels like there's a lot of like dead air sometimes where someone will say something and then it just like shows Bilbo like slowly moving while the camera stays on him. And I think that's partly because it was edited and made for TV. So there's like a lot
clear
of like
commercial breaks.
There's clear commercial breaks. There's a lot of like probably stretched scenes of limited animation so that they can just, fill time. But it gives the whole thing a weird timing issue that makes me uneasy. It's a weird edited movie. It
is, yeah. There's a clear lack of sort of momentum. Like there's story momentum. Like there's plenty of things happen.
Yeah.
And there's certainly plenty of characters, but it's like, and like some of them are generally fleshed out, and then some of them are like, and 8 more dwarves, but.
And the rest.
but it's also,
even Snow White's like, who the fuck are these guys?
Yeah, exactly. But it moves like traffic. Like it's like stop, go, and it's very difficult to sort of be like, what are we doing right now?
I mean, I would argue that's probably the most accurate to the book, too. The book is sort of like a road movie where it's very episodic. Like each chapter is essentially a little mini adventure that, Bilbo or the dwarves get in and they have to sort of wriggle their way out of. It doesn't help that this one has a lot of just those montage scenes that we were talking about where it's like, okay, and then we're back to this again. Okay.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised. I guess I didn't remember that. Well, I knew the last of the 3 Hobbit movies was called War of the Five Kings or whatever, 5 Armies. But
Battle of the Five Armies.
Battle of the Five Armies. I was thinking of Game of Thrones, I think. War of the Five Kings. But it's really kind of confusing when it comes up because first of all they're like ready to throw down, and basically Bilbo's like, we don't have to do this, there's enough treasure here, let's just share it. And there's like, no, it's principle. All of a sudden he's, what's his name, lead dwarf,
he's the bravest guy around.
Yeah, he's very brave. And then they're about to kill each other, and then the goblins show up and they're like all of a sudden besties, like the end of a G.I. Joe episode. It's very weird like timing.
I think it's supposed to be played for its ridiculousness. I think again like the time frame that he's writing this is right after World War I, which was very much a battle of five armies where a bunch of people were being assholes for the reason of, hey, I'm the cousin to the brother of Queen Victoria, so I have to be allied with this group of people, and you're the niece to the nephew of
you hate the
Archduke person.
Ferdinand.
I'm glad he's dead, I'll be honest with you.
Whoa!
So I think he is playing up the ridiculousness of greed amongst our armies, and
that's clear with
how
Bilbo
leaders can suddenly send their people to go die for a really stupid cause, and Bilbo has the exact right reaction, which is, this is dumb.
Yeah.
And because I don't want to get involved in a very stupid war, you're calling me a coward, even though I've done hundreds of things that prove I'm not a coward.
And yet he does just kind of chill during the battle, which is kind of fun. I like that.
In the book, I mean, in this they play it up as a joke. In the book, he actually does get knocked unconscious and wakes up after the battle. But in this, he just lies and said, "Oh, I've been out for hours."
Okay, I'm gonna do some questions now.
Okay, lay them on me. I do want to talk about Gollum in a bit, but yeah, let's hear some questions. Questions corner. Those are both spelled with Q's.
Questions corner. I think that'll come up because that's my last question. Has to do with the ring.
What's Gollum's deal is the question.
What's Gollum's deal? I mean, it kind of is. Okay, we already talked about why is Gandalf doing that. I think that's a fair, like even if it's retrofitted to the story, like what exactly he's doing. I think that's that
works better for me than we've got to get this homebody who never goes on adventures. We absolutely need to have him on this adventure.
Yeah,
that's the part where I'm like, Jirah token, I'll let this one slide.
How well defined in the books are Gandalf's powers? Because they are so. In this movie, he controls the weather. He disguised himself as a tree. He turned himself into a tree. He has electricity pine cone power, and he also can summon the eagles. And Glenn Fry, Don Henley, Joe Walsh, they just show up anytime he asks them.
I was just like, wait, Don Henley's a name I know. What is he doing? What is he riffing on? And they said they wouldn't get back together until hell freezes over. That's my one Eagles joke.
It's good.
If you're asking how well defined are Gandalf's powers in the book, not very.
Okay.
I will say, I mean, one of the things I like, I mean, in this one, it sort of insinuates that he has control over dawn.
Right. Yeah, because he makes the light come out when the trolls are attacking.
In the book, it's a little bit more nebulous that he manages to confuse the trolls until they keep arguing until dawn. I think that's how it's implied in the book. But in this, it does make it seem like he has shifted the axis of the earth in order to save his friends.
I found this even in or at least when I originally watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy, is it's like when you have someone that overpowered, like it's a wizard, it's magic. There's going to be a certain amount of literal and figurative hand waving, but like you get to set the rules as the writer. You tell me what the deal is with these magic, and then you come up with reasons why he can't just zap his way out of every situation. That's your job as a storyteller, not mine to be like, why did he do it then, but not then, and then, and not then. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that, I mean, people complain about, and we can talk about this when we talk about the trilogy, people complain about the Eagles when they come at one point, but they didn't come at this other point. And I think that's a little bit, even at the time, even though I don't know why he didn't do that, I'm a little bit like, yeah, because that would have been stupid. You know what I mean?
I really enjoy this movie. Why didn't they make it into, a 45-minute jaunt of riding on a bunch of eagles' backs into a volcano?
And you're like, why didn't you explain to me? And it's like, you wanted more exposition in this movie?
While his powers aren't really defined, he's never like so overpowered that it seems like he doesn't have like that Superman effect where it's like, oh, you can just sort of spin the earth backwards. He always seems a little bit limited, and I think that's partly because he is in a mortal form. He is in a human body, and that somewhat limits him. He can like light a pine cone on fire, and maybe that's about it. But he's not like someone who can just like, shoot a lightning bolt into a Balrog skull and then,
until he gets a new cloak, and then
of course
all bets are off.
Then he's just like pretty much an A-bomb walking through Middle Earth. But I think he always feels a little restrained enough, even though it's not well defined what his powers are or limited to. He feels like he's never so overpowered that he feels like, at least in Lord of the Rings, he doesn't feel like a Deus Ex Machina. Here he does kind of like pop in and out at will.
Right.
And especially because the editing of this movie is so quick, it feels like every 2 minutes he's like, I gotta go. And then on the third minute, he's like, I'm back to get you out of trouble again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's a bit weird because they set up the challenges of him just not being there. And then they do kind of get into, until it's like, there's just no way out. And then he shows up, and you're like, okay.
Right. Well. I think he's a little bit better framed in Lord of the Rings than he is in The Hobbit. He is sort of like a fantasy wizard in The Hobbit.
I think you explained this well enough by saying that this was sort of a test run for this world, but I didn't realize the spiders were also in this story, as well as Lord of the Rings. Greatest hits.
Jirah Tolkien really doesn't seem to like spiders all that much.
Too many legs.
The spiders are also here. They are smaller than Shelob is in the Lord of the Rings, but they are here and they talk. That's my main thing. Like when I read The Hobbit,
got bunny ears.
Oh right, everyone's talking in this.
Yeah,
trolls are talking, spiders are talking, eagles are talking, thrushes are talking. Yeah, the bunny spiders, they're very silly, but they named Sting. You got to hand it to them. They're the ones who.
Is that where he took the name from?
Right, when he stabs the first spider, he goes, instead of just dying, the spider says, it stings, and that's when Bilbo says, I shall call you Sting. I'm like, yeah, I guess that fits, if you really want to name something.
And that's when Gordon Sumner was like, yeah, I'm going to use that.
I like that, too. He was sitting right there in the next tree over, partially incapacitated by spider venom, when he was like, I like it. I like it. I'm going to do that and fuck my wife for 5 hours.
Can you tell me the difference between goblins and orcs? Because they call them, they're basically used interchangeably in this movie.
I will say, like, Tolkien, for some reason, he calls them goblins in The Hobbit and he calls them orcs in The Lord of the Rings, but they are the same.
Okay.
They are the same race.
Okay.
Although it is, again, I think this speaks to it being sort of a first run. There is, like, it seems weird that the orcs would have a king. That doesn't seem like their thing when you follow them in The Lord of the Rings. But yeah, according to Tolkien, there is no difference.
All right. This is very different. I don't remember, honestly, the Hobbit trilogy movies that much either, but this is a very different characterization for Smaug.
Smaug. He sounds like he's from Texas. He sounds like, well, what do we have here? He's not that bad, but he has like a John Wayne, like sort of swagger to his voice. It's a choice.
He sounds like a grizzled, greasy spoon diner owner to me. Like he's just like trying to seek my treasure.
Treasure, I'll measure my treasure. He says, well, thief, I can smell you. I can feel your air. And I'm like, what choice was this that this guy is here? And he also seems like the guy who recorded the voice gives no shits.
Right.
There will be no second takes on this one. Also, I think that what also disappointed me about Smaug, they design him like sort of cat-like or maybe bat-like.
Yeah, he's like a big kitty.
And it's
weird.
Maybe this is because I'm just a giant nerd, but I'm like, I feel like Smaug, I want him to look like a dragon. I don't want him to look like a giant cat with wings. I want him to look like what I imagine a dragon to look like. And I'm going to back this up with pedantic nerdiness by saying, like, within this movie, they refer to him as a snake and a worm.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you saw a giant, cat, non-cat flying through the air, you wouldn't just call him a worm. He's also really fat in this, which again, I would say, would you really call him? He's got a big old cat belly. I don't feel like you would call him a snake. He doesn't have very snake-like proportions.
Yeah.
Maybe a snake that just ate someone.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like when they eat an egg, there's just like a big oval.
Right. There's a big cartoon shape in the middle of them. I always appreciate that they did something unexpected, but I'm always a little disappointed that he doesn't look like what I want him to look like.
Yeah. Lauren had a lot of questions about the ring and Gollum, and I didn't write all of her questions down, unfortunately, but here's how I tried to explain it.
Her questions were, why are we watching this? How many more movies are there that we're going to be watching?
We're almost
Jesus
done,
Christ,
right?
Did you sign on to doing the Hobbit trilogy as a Patreon exclusive?
I don't know if she knows about that yet.
Ooh. Wait until she's just falling asleep and then just whisper it in her ear.
Hey, babe.
We're going to be watching a 9-hour trilogy based on the same book.
First of all, can I use your credit card?
What's the Amazon code again?
So there's a powerful ring, which we'll find out about the forging of it in the movie. So it's not important yet, but it clearly like power, and it's power that's tied to Sauron.
Yeah.
Gollum, who used to be Smeagol, who was a hobbit.
Mm-hmm.
Smeagol found this ring, and then it basically, over a long period of time, turned him crazy, turned him into this monster, and it looks very much like a frog in this. And basically, he's just been hanging out, talking to himself and the ring, going crazy. And then Bilbo stumbles in, ends up pilfering the ring and leaving and kind of driving him crazy.
Yeah, so what's the question?
The question, is that right?
It.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So as for this movie, it doesn't really talk about Sauron. It doesn't talk about that the ring drove him crazy or anything. The only thing we know is that this ring is magical because it makes Bilbo invisible when he puts it on.
Yeah.
That's it. That's like the extent of its powers as far as this movie's concerned, right?
Yeah, in the book too, I mean, it doesn't really dive into the sort of darker elements of the ring. That's kind of like the big twist in The Lord of the Rings. When you start reading that, you're like, oh, shit. Guess things are all fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as Bilbo knows, it is a magic ring that makes him invisible.
Well, and it's clear that like even without knowing that there were a shitload of pages to come in other books, like they make a point of zooming in on the ring that's on a like display case on Bilbo's shelf. Like clearly this means something, even though we're like, why is this? Maybe it's just a token of his adventure, you know. But
well, I mean, the movie being made in '77, they know how popular
it's coming.
Lord of the Rings. So even the viewers would have known there's a big, book trilogy that came out.
It's clear that it's like leading to something else, but it was just kind of confusing because they don't touch on like what's Gollum's fucking deal. He's just this crazy lizard living in a cave.
I mean, that's essentially what happens in the book as well. They don't really like describe him as looking like a hobbit. They don't really describe him as looking like a goblin either. Like they sort of are clear that he's not a goblin. He's this sort of creature with these big, cat eyes, essentially, that can see in the dark. And he's a little bit kooky bananas in that he sort of talks to himself and mutters to himself and says "my precious" a lot and pluralizes almost every other word. He and Yoda could have like a
weird
specific dialect off. Gollum in this, I really could not. Tyler is sort of Lord of the Rings agnostic. He doesn't hate them. He's not like really that big into them, but he loves Gollum.
Yeah.
So much. Like everything Gollum does is always hysterical. I don't think that Tolkien's strength isn't necessarily in characters, but when he does get a good character right, he like knocks it out of the park. Like Gollum is such a deranged, weird character.
Yeah.
And Theodore Gottlieb plays Gollum in this movie, and he makes Andy Serkis look like Downton Abbey. Like he makes him so uncomfortably crazy in this that it's like, Bilbo, you got to get the fuck out of here. The fact that Orson Bean is being so zen around him, like, no, this man is crazy and you need to like violently insane and you need to be out of this cave as soon as possible. As I said in the intro, like Theodore played one of the Klopeks in The Burbs and also is like chaotic evil in that as well. And here he's just constantly screeching and just, you can barely understand him at times. He's just muttering just constantly. I couldn't get enough of this version of Gollum. He's just so bonkers and so discomforting that I just wanted to watch him forever. It was great.
I think I didn't feel the same way, mostly because I'm realizing now in retrospect that it's because it was so undercut by Bilbo being like not afraid.
Bilbo is acting like he's meeting that ant he doesn't like very much. But I'm like, this is a lunatic who's obviously trying to eat you. He has stated plainly, if you lose this game, he will eat you. Yeah, and Bilbo was like, oh my stars.
They go into a essentially an old-timey rap battle, which is a riddle off.
It's pretty much 8 Mile, yeah.
Mom spaghetti. I'm just surprised that these they all have this many riddles in their pocket. Like if I were like right now, Damon, I'm going to kill you unless you come up with a riddle. Would you be able to? Because I couldn't come up with a single riddle.
DJ, I know we're in quarantine and we haven't hung out face-to-face very often, but I keep Laffy Taffy wrappers in my pocket just in case I'm ever trapped in a cage with a violent sociopath. That way I can always have a riddle on hand.
I shouldn't have chosen Bazooka Joe. Now I just have bad
You have to describe scenes and then puns on top of that. I think this is probably something that's been lost a little bit to time. I think this is a particularly British thing and also old-timey thing on top of that. It's like the trolls that like the troll is like a question, answer my question 3 and like. Well, no, I think it's more of a just like if you were sitting around the fire and there was, Green Hornet had just gone off the air on the radio, you might, you might like, I think in America you would have like maybe a handful of like dumb jokes or like bawdy jokes you might tell, right. Or you might like have a game of riddles. I think it's one of those weird things that's a little bit lost to time.
A duel. If you're in America.
Right. If you're an American, you'd shoot each other to pass the time.
Right. Okay, I think that's all my questions. That's all I got.
You didn't like this version of Gollum?
I love Andy Serkis's Gollum, so I was not as charmed by this one. Although
when he says when Bilbo says, "What have I got in my pockets?" or "What have I got in my pocket?" I see, even I pluralized it for no reason. What have I got in my pocket? And Gollum's just like, he's basically like, how should I know what you have in your filthy, nasty pockets is? The fact that he just immediately like goes below the belt and just starts attacking the integrity of his pockets, I just think is really funny to me. This movie, I think, keeps in the spirit of the book of like eliding all the nonsense names. Like they don't name Thorin's father, they don't name the Elf King. They're just like, all you need to know is that,
who cares?
Yeah, you don't need to keep up with this. You really gonna help that you got a guy named Thorin and he keeps referencing 2 guys named Thrain and Thror? There was a weird moment in Gollum's duel or the riddle duel where rather than like having them
the rap battle, please.
The rap battle, where rather than having them rap at each other, they just like cut to like panning shot of the background paintings and had like another fucking song played where people were singing riddles rather than hearing Gollum and Bilbo tell the riddles to each other. I imagined it was a way to save on animation because you can just paint the background once and then just have the camera pan over it. But it was very odd choice for what is supposed to be a very tense scene. I just wanted to complain about that. The elves are grotesque walking terrors. Did you catch that? That all the elves are just from my nightmares?
I got confused between they run into Elrond.
Yeah. And who has a fucking constellation floating around his head for some reason.
Yeah. I said he watched Midsommar, so he would just he thought that was cool. And then there's the Wood Elves, right? Is that what you're talking about? Because they're like more monster-y.
Yeah, they meet Elrond in Rivendell, but then when they are in Mirkwood, they run afoul of the Wood Elves. And the Wood Elves are like gross. They are also...
They're goblin-y.
When in doubt, the production design was like, based it on a frog. What should Bilbo look like? Frog.
Frog.
What should Gollum look like? Frog.
Frog.
What about the elves? I'm thinking frog.
Look, I'm a frog guy. What can I say?
If you're going to ask me these questions, Greg, I'm always going to respond frog. Do something yourself for once. Frogs are great. I'm not anti-frog. I feel like my record speaks for itself. I'm very pro-frog.
Look, no one's saying you're not.
I got to hand it to the Lake Town boys. They've got some short mini skirts.
Lake Town boys.
They've been living on top of a lake.
That's why they wrote that song.
It's implied on the name of their town. It's built on top of a fucking lake.
Seems like
this song's not going anywhere.
Seems like there's plenty of good land right around the lake. I'm not sure why they did that.
No, we're going to be doing a lot of sticks and docks. Thank you very much. But we'll be doing this.
You want to go to the verdict?
Yeah.
Come on, The greatest adventure
is what lies ahead. And that was Jennifer Tilly covering Glenn Yarborough's The Greatest Adventure.
I feel like you're going to have a lot more to say as someone who's more educated, so I'm going to go first.
More educated. Read nerdy books.
Yeah, I just feel like you have more insight based on your background as a nerd.
Well, I was doing sports and making out with girls and stuffs.
I will say this is like, especially when you talk about the background that you bring in from the books, like it does make me appreciate it more, but I found this very annoying. Your inner child is an idiot. It's weird. It's not that all the drawings are bad, but the animation is very weird. The voice acting has some
talk about how weird the animation is.
It's very weird. And you mentioned this in the intro, like all the lines that they draw have like the same weight. So it's very heavy kind of animation. But it's like, you know,
see, everyone has the same gnarled hands.
Yeah.
Everyone's very a knuckle heavy hand, these animators prefer.
Yeah. Well, and it's like they're interesting drawings, but it is very like off-putting to watch, especially over the course of an entire movie.
Especially for a fucking kids movie.
Yeah, it's a little scary. It's a little creepy. And then, yeah, some of the voice acting is good, but most of it I found not good. And not like in an individual sense, but it didn't like help. And the songs were Glenn Yarbrough. What is it? Yarbrough? Glenn Yarbrough?
Yarbrough.
That was annoying as shit. I hated it. It was funny, but not in the way that I wanted. I agree that I liked some of the in-game songs, like the Goblin song.
The in-game cutscenes I really enjoyed, but the gameplay really sucked.
It was like,
I'm just imagining you sitting there with your Switch controller just waiting. When does it fucking stop? Oh, the whole thing's a cutscene.
I did not enjoy myself watching this, I have to be honest.
I did not enjoy myself watching this.
Even though I did watch this as a kid, I don't carry a lot of nostalgia for this either. So I think that if I did, I might feel differently. But like as someone who like came in generally to the whole Lord of the Rings thing much later, I'm just like, this is stupid. What did you think?
I will agree that your inner child is an idiot. I think in terms of animation and as a interpretation of Lord of the Rings, that's different than the one that's sort of become the pop culture mainstay at this point. It's interesting to watch.
Yeah.
But it is weird in a lot of, like, the voice acting is not a great choice. The music is often not a great choice. The animation is good. So, I mean, if you're an animation nerd like I am, I mean, it's fun to kind of watch this very particular style of gnarled hands animation. Yeah, as a story, it just feels like oddly choppy, sometimes too clipping through it, like Cliff's Notes.
Yeah.
Other times, it seems to be undercutting its own like dramatic tension, like in the scenes with Gollum where Orson Bean just seems like he's hanging out with a guy at a bar that he doesn't seem to particularly care for. I'm like, you're stuck in a cave with a murderer. Yeah, this then the Smaug design and the Smaug acting, everything just seems like really kind of not my thing. So I will say, your inner child's an idiot. Case closed. We are gonna, for our patrons, we are gonna eventually watch the newer Hobbit trilogy, and having seen that somewhat recently, because that only came out like five years ago at this point. I think it's 10 years now. Is it really? Jesus Christ. We are gonna die one day, and it came out 10 years ago. It can't be right. I refuse to accept it. I think 2012. I think the first one came out. Regardless, I've seen it much more recently, and so I there's a little bit of fogginess, but I do think this is better than that. Just in the fact that they took a brief story and made a brief movie about it, and didn't try to like stuff it with weird stuff. I may not agree on that point, but we'll find out. What do you think, everybody? Why don't you email us? Your inner child is an idiot @gmail.com. You can text us or call us at 615-576-0525. Oh, yeah. Should we play the message from Jonathon? Oh, yeah. Let's hear what Jonathon has to say. A patron and DePaul alum, John Day. Yeah, we've got a message from John. I think, John, also, I need your notes from Thursday, March 13th, 2003, from our medieval medicine class. That I'll need that. If you could just fax those to me, that'd be great.
Hey, this is John Day, who some of you may remember. I just had to listen to the Bill and Ted episode, and I had to call in because I watched that a lot growing up, and my freshman year of college, actually, we were in my like intro, I think philosophy class or something. And like one of the first things we were talking about, I mentioned like, oh yeah, I liked how, Socrates said this. And everyone's like, good Bill and Ted joke. And I was like, yes, that was a joke. Cause I totally knew how to pronounce it before that. Anyway, that was it. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.
Yeah, that's great. That's a classic. Have read it many times, but have never said it out loud. That happened to me with the word chassis a while ago when I confidently said chassis, even though I've used the word chassis and I've read the word chassis. I had never put those two things together.
I also had a similar instance. My apologies to the good people of Tucson, Arizona, for once referring to it as Tucson, Arizona. I just assumed Tucson was spelled Toosan, and that this was a different town, some small, ghost town of Tucson, Arizona. My apologies.
Thanks for calling in, though, John. We appreciate it. Once again, if you want to leave us a message, 615-576-0525. If you want to become a patron of the show, patreon.com/YourInnerChild'sAnIdiot. We'd like to thank our patrons, including
Jonathan Day,
Just Cuz, The Zesty,
Jacob Grimm,
Particle Man,
Demon's Australian Accent,
Heather Tuggle, Dramatically Placed Hot Dog,
Karen Curd,
Larissa Maestro,
Lindsey Nell,
T. Smith,
Jeremy Powlen,
Kevin from Cleveland,
Captain Jean-Luc Picard,
Brandon Hardy,
who is, in fact, the supreme ruler of this podcast,
His Honor the Mayor,
and Dan McIntyre.
Thank you all very much for supporting the show. We really appreciate it. If you want to support like them, patreon.com/YourInnerChild'sAnIdiot. And I'm going to go ahead and just get...
Oh, no. That sounds like a man straining for a guitar. Okay. Yeah.
The greatest adventure is when we're done doing the show.
It really is. Yeah. It's comparable to leaving your home and going out and negotiating with trolls.
What's funny is, having not left the house at all pretty much for a year or so, it would be a very great adventure just to leave my neighborhood.
You really identify with Bilbo Baggins as he heard these descriptions of a dragon attacking a mountain. You're like, it does move through me as well, Bilbo.